أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم بسم الله. So, welcome everyone to our session for this month, where we are going to be discussing what you can do to protect your child from developing an eating disorder. This is a series from a mental health awareness series. We have been conducting these sessions every month for the past more than 2 years. So Alhamdulillah, we have a content of over 50 hours on different topics by different mental health professionals of our Austin community. You can watch these, have access to these videos on YouTube channel of NAMCC. So there's a playlist there called Mental Health Awareness Series, and all the recorded sessions are there. 50 hours worth of content on different topics. Today, and these sessions are conducted on the third Saturday of every month. And we bring in relevant topics to our community. This month, we are welcoming again our sister Najeeha Khan. She is a licensed professional counselor who specializes in eating disorders. She received her master's in counseling psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she gained a training in trauma treatment, racial ethnic identity development, anxiety, depression, life transitions, body image concerns, and more. Currently, Sister Najeeha works at Austin Counseling plus Nutrition. Thank you. I think we had some interruption there. Where she provides psychotherapy to a diverse range of folks. And she also integrates Islamic ideologies of healing into sessions with Muslim clients. And she aims to focus on clients' relationships with themselves, with others, and with their environment. We also have a link posted in the ticket tailor in the registration form that we send out. This one has her contact details, how you can gain access to her if you want to have continued discussion with her going forward, and you can pursue it further. Without further ado, I hand it over to Sister Najeeha. Welcome back, sister.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Brother Altaf. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yeah, so today I really, with Ramadan, I feel like this is a month that really makes us focus on our relationship with food. And so I thought it would be a really relevant time to talk about eating disorders and particularly what steps we can take as families, as caregivers, or just as loved ones of people who might be at risk for developing an eating disorder, which a lot of young people are. And just what we can do if they do have an eating disorder, how to kind of help them recover from that. So I will share my screen. I have a PowerPoint. All right, so Bismillah. So how to protect your child from developing an eating disorder. As Brother Aldaf said, I work at a practice called Austin Counseling and Nutrition. We have on staff a handful of dietitians and therapists, and we primarily specialize in eating disorders. We're located in Central Austin, and we see a wide range of disordered eating with a wide range of ages. And I'll have more information on resources, other resources in Texas, if you feel like someone in your life might be struggling at the end of the PowerPoint. Okay, so outlined then, I'm just going to very briefly talk about what eating disorders are, just in case folks aren't familiar. And then we'll talk about risk factors and protective factors, and then steps that you can take for yourself and for your family, and then resources. So, and I do want to just start by saying, I can give the research and I can tell you what experts recommend about how to prevent or decrease the chances of someone in your family from developing an eating disorders. But at the end of the day, we can never say for sure that someone will or will not get any mental illness. That's true for any illness, right? So ultimately, there's genetics, there's environment, there's trauma, there's so many things, social factors that can impact someone's risk for developing any illness. Ultimately, it's up to Allah. And so I just want to make this presentation and give you all some tools so that you can do whatever is in your power to just decrease those chances. And so this talk really is going to be about building a healthy relationship with food for the whole family, not just the person who might be affected. And I also want to say, like, if you're on this talk and maybe you have a child that already has had an eating disorder or currently has an eating disorder, I don't want any of you to feel like you did something terrible, because as I said, there's so many factors that go into it, and you can do everything right as a parent, and ultimately not all of it is going to be in your control. And the research says that a lot of eating disorder consequences are reversible. And that's very much part of being a parent. You can go back and make up for things that maybe you didn't know at the time, and now you'll know, inshallah. Okay, so starting with what are eating disorders. So just a boiled down version, eating disorders are any disturbance in a pattern of eating within outside of what is considered culturally normal that can greatly impact someone's functioning in many areas of their life. So obviously right now, Ramadan, this is considered culturally normal that we're all not eating all day. So this would not be considered an eating disorder, what we all are doing. Outside of those cultural norms, if someone is changing the way they eat and it's really negatively impacting them, that may be considered some disordered eating. We in the eating disorder world see eating disorders as a really, really common thing, and it just goes underdiagnosed so much because so many people don't know that they have an eating disorder. I just have a list of the most common ones that I think maybe most people have heard of on this slide, but there are more. But these are the ones that I'm kind of going to focus on today. Okay, so anorexia, I think, is one that a lot of people have heard of. This is when people are really focused on restricting what they're eating, and this can sometimes look like extreme dieting. Folks with anorexia are really, really scared of gaining weight. They're very scared of their body changing, getting larger, and they have sometimes a very skewed awareness of what their body really looks like. And sometimes this can involve a lot of weight loss in the individual, and it can be really deadly. Bulimia is similar. There's some body image issues involved, but here the focus is more on purging or compensating for eating. And so folks with bulimia might get stuck in these cycles of restricting what they're eating, and then because their body's starving, they might end up binge eating. And then because the binge eating can often make them uncomfortable or feel guilty, then they'll go into purging. And purging is making yourself vomit, taking laxatives, diuretics, over exercising, fasting for the next number of hours or so. So all these can get someone stuck in a cycle. Here, this is interesting. People's weight may or may not change at all. This is why this one gets unnoticed, but it's still just as deadly as anorexia because the body's still being impacted very heavily. Then we have binge eating disorder, which is eating very large quantities of food in a very short amount of time. This is interesting. I have a lot of clients that come in and they originally think they have a binge eating disorder, and what they actually have is anorexia or bulimia. And that's because I think people really don't have an idea of what a large quantity of food is. A large quantity of food, I don't mean that you have like a bag of snacks and you ate the whole bag in one sitting. That's not binge eating. Binge eating is a really extreme amount of food. It's to the point where people have to feel very numb in order to eat all of that because it's so uncomfortable, so painful for their body to eat that much. So that's binge eating. And again, weight gain or weight loss or weight change may or may not be evident with this one. Orthorexia, a lot of people have orthorexia. And I think this is one that we don't hear about as much, but this is a real preoccupation with healthy eating. And I put that in quotes because we don't really know. Healthy eating looks different person to person, and we don't really know. We can't always say what's going to be healthy for one person is for another. But people with orthorexia can get really, really preoccupied with that to the point where it results in loss of certain nutrients, disordered behavior. They may even get preoccupied with what other people are eating. ARFID is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, most common in children, but it is seen in adults as well. So there's no body image concerns here. These people just can have a very low appetite for whatever reason, or just like low interest in eating. And it can result in a lot of nutritional deficiencies if this is resulting in like they're not even getting a certain nutrient group. Sometimes they are the sensory issues of certain foods are really bothering them, or sometimes it's just they don't like the taste of something, and that can cause nutritional deficiencies. All right, so why should we care? Eating disorders have the highest mortality rates of any mental illness. They can cause a lot of deaths, frankly. And so this slide is not to scare anybody, but just to show that it's really important to care about this. What usually ends up happening with especially anorexia and bulimia, where food is being restricted and then purged, is that there can be a lot of organ damage. Ultimately, when you're over time, the more and more you restrict, the weaker your body gets. And oftentimes these people, they may have heart failure. And that's one common way that people may die from eating disorders. Another really common way is it's a really difficult disorder to live with. People really feel like they're suffering and really have intense anxiety and depression accompanying it. And so suicide is another way that a lot of people with eating disorders end up dying. So aside from just the mortality rate, there's a great impact on health, weakened muscles and bones. They found that for girls, especially young girls, they may not reach their peak bone density if they're not eating enough, which puts them at risk for developing osteoporosis much sooner later in life. There can be a disrupted menstrual cycle or other hormone disruptions and fertility issues. Electrolyte imbalances and nutritional deficiencies, I think, goes without saying. Decreased immunity. And this is one that I think a lot of people don't realize. It's just the negative impact on brain health. Your brain, just like all your other organs, really needs nutrients. And when it doesn't have that, those reasoning centers of your brain are going to have a really hard time functioning. And so that can actually cause higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, and other mental illness. Also, what they found is that for young kids and teens, when they have an eating disorder and they're restricting what they're eating, there can actually be a pause in the maturing of their brain. So our brains tend to mature up until we get to our mid-20s, sometimes even late 20s. That's what we found recently in research. And that might just pause. Now, it doesn't stop forever. The minute you start to refeed yourself and get those deficiencies figured out, then your brain will start maturing again and pick up again. But I just add that there to give empathy that sometimes when you're talking to someone with an eating disorder and it feels like maybe cognitively they're not able to understand what you're saying, or there's certain concepts that you're feeling like, okay, someone of your age should, normally be able to understand this. It may be because that part of their brain has just stopped maturing and that energy is going to the survival mechanisms in their body. Okay, so now let's talk about risk factors. So these risk factors are what research shows. I'm not going to focus on all of these because, again, not all of these are going to be in your control as a caregiver or a loved one of someone with an eating disorder. But I'll briefly read them, and then I will talk about the last one, which I have highlighted. Okay, so having a relative with an eating disorder, there is a big genetic component. A history of dieting can put you at risk for developing an eating disorder. Some eating disorder therapists actually believe that any diet is considered disordered eating. Maybe not a full-blown disorder, but there is some disordered eating there. Having type 1 diabetes, having historical trauma. So if you come from a family lineage where there was starvation or famine, that can actually put your child who never experienced that at risk for an eating disorder. Experiencing bullying or teasing, being an ethnic minority, and social isolation are also all risk factors. And then this last one I highlighted again, because this is the one I want to focus on, exposure to weight stigma. And this is the one that you as caregivers are going to have the most influence over for your child. And again, the others may not always be in your control. So I'm going to talk about what that is and what you can do to offset that in your home. But in short summary, weight stigma, they found in research that worrying about your child's weight is actually what causes overeating in children. And then overeating weight gain, that's what can cause yo-yo dieting. Yo-yo dieting is a term that we use for cycling between dieting and then stopping the diet and gaining the weight back, and then going back onto another diet, losing weight, stopping the diet, gaining the weight back, finding another diet, and then that cycle repeats and repeats. And this results in a lot of disordered eating for people. Fun fact about yo-yo dieting, a lot of the health effects that tend to be correlated with weight gain are actually, they found, can be explained by yo-yo dieting, just because those cycles of weight gain, weight loss, weight gain can be really, really hard on someone's body. So I just want to make a note of that. Okay, so a little bit more about weight stigma. These are some myths that I believe society kind of force feeds us, no pun intended. We live in a society that really revolves around diet culture. Diet culture, I think this is something we see everywhere. It prioritizes weight loss and over-exercise, and the less you eat, the better. And is really obsessed, I would say, with the way that we look and how dieting can get you that attractive body that you want. And that's a society we live in. And that causes a lot of weight stigma against the idea of gaining weight, and certainly against people who then do gain weight and are overweight or fat or whatever you want to call it. So here's some common myths that we all were made to believe because of diet culture. Being thin is healthy, it's attractive, and it's good. Being fat is unhealthy, unattractive, or bad. If you cannot lose weight and keep it off, something's wrong with you. The less you eat, the better it is for your health. It's important to avoid certain food groups. And then here I just listed some very common diet fads in our, I think that some of these are recent, some of these have cycled in and out, and etc., or just restriction of calories. Okay, so let's address these myths. So the myth that being thin is healthy, attractive, or good. Really important to know, attraction is so subjective and trends are constantly changing. If you even just if you are older than 10 years old, think about what was considered beautiful 10 years ago. Every decade of living, I think there is a new trend that comes about of what is considered attractive, and the pictures that you see in media change constantly. If you look at pictures from centuries ago, it's going to be a very different body that was considered attractive than what it is today. Okay, so then being fat is considered unhealthy or unattractive. So research shows that weight doesn't actually tell you much about someone's health. Yes, there are correlations, but something like grip strength, so how strong you can grip something, actually tells you more about somebody's health than weight does. So it's very interesting that as a society, we're so obsessed with weight being an indicator of health, because it's really not the best indicator at all. And research has consistently shown that the highest death rates are found in underweight people, and the lowest death rates are actually found in the overweight category. So I think that's just an interesting thing to consider, that like sometimes the diet trends that we hear that are encouraging weight loss, they're not actually reflecting what the research is really telling us about weight science. Okay, and the CDC has confirmed that research, by the way, about the mortality rates amongst different weight categories. Okay, so the idea that if you can't lose weight and keep it off long term, something is deeply wrong with you as a person. 80 to 95% of diets and weight loss measures fail. And not only that, but they usually result in more long-term weight gain. So the weight you were at before you started the diet, you will likely get all that weight back after the diet and more. And so that's, again, something to consider, that if all these people are trying to go on diets and not able to keep the weight off, maybe it's not you, maybe it's the diets, maybe it's the idea of dieting. We have something all humans have called a set point weight. This is basically the weight that our bodies are able to function at optimally, that our bodies are happy at being at. It's determined by genetics, environment, stress, hormones, evolution. All these things determine what everyone's unique set point weight is. And not ironically, a history of dieting can change your set point weight. So a history of dieting can usually actually increase what your set point weight is. And so the more and more you diet, the more your body's going to want to increase that set point weight. it's a really evolutionarily smart response, because your body thinks that it's starving and it's going to want to conserve the weight in your body to prevent more issues down the line. And it's a really smart thing that our bodies do, I think. This set point weight can actually fluctuate about 10 to 15 pounds above and below the points. Okay, so now the point of it's important to avoid certain food groups. All these diet trends, paleo diet, keto diet, carnivore diet, I just listed some that I've been hearing recently. Dietitians actually recommend adding, not subtracting. And I really want to stress the fact that, these are trends, these are fads for a reason, because at some point people realize they don't work. And every few years, or maybe even, every few months, you're going to hear of a new diet that's in and that everyone's swearing by and really telling you to try. And it's just safe to say that at some point that diet fad is going to go too. Okay, I really like this quote. It's from a dietitian named Crystal Carges, and they said, psychological effect of food restriction cannot be overstated. When we restrict children's access to any food group, they are naturally going to become more preoccupied with it and drawn to those foods, and then overreact and have erratic behavior when they do get that food. This is so important. You can insert any food group into that. Sugar, carbs, specific snacks, whatever you want, it has the same effect on everyone, not just children, actually. And research has shown that the negative consequences of restricting any food far outweighs any possible positive result of restricting that food, because it can result in binge eating and other forms of disordered eating. Ironically, and this is the part where people kind of always raise eyebrows whenever I tell my clients and families about this, ironically, the best way to prevent overeating and disordered eating is to allow yourself to eat fully guilt-free, full permission to eat whatever you want and whenever you want. So I want to talk about the role of guilt, because it's so powerful when it comes to eating. If you're eating something, I want everyone to kind of reflect on a moment where you've been eating something, because we've all probably had this, and you felt guilty about eating that thing for whatever reason. Maybe someone at some point in your life told you it's not a healthy thing to eat, or maybe someone told you that you shouldn't be eating as much of that thing. You should eat in moderation, or whatever. People often have ideas about that. I'm not going to name any specific foods, because we all probably have a different food that's coming to mind when we think of this. So if you're eating that food and you're thinking to yourself, I shouldn't be eating this, what ends up happening? Psychologically, but also physically, you're not able to enjoy the food. Why? Because so much of your mental energy is going into that guilt, into those thoughts of, I shouldn't be eating this. How can I get myself to stop eating this? Gosh, I really suck that I can't stop eating this. You can't eat mindfully because your mind is in so many different places. You're not enjoying the food. That results in a feeling of dissatisfaction. You're not satisfied with that food. And that causes you to not know when to stop eating. That's a biological response. You're feeling restricted, so you don't know. You're not able to actually enjoy the food. You're not able to know when to stop eating the food. That's how people end up overeating usually. And that refeeds the guilt. I really shouldn't have eaten that. Next time you see the food, that response is going to be even stronger. Instead, I really want to introduce the concept of acceptance when it comes to eating. So instead of telling yourself, I shouldn't be eating this, try saying, I am allowed to eat this. I have permission to eat this. What ends up happening with that? You get to be much more present with the food. You get to be really mindful, and you get to enjoy and feel the satisfaction of that food, not just in your brain, but also in your body and your stomach. What that actually ends up causing is the ability to stop eating as soon as you feel that satisfaction hit you. You're not going to want more of that food because you already feel satisfied. But the trick is to really, really listen to your body and what it's telling you. And I just want to add a note. I'm not talking about medical situations. Like, for example, if you have a gluten intolerance, for example, and you can't eat gluten, like this doesn't apply to that. You shouldn't be telling yourself, I am allowed to eat gluten, and then make yourself eat gluten. That's not the situation I'm describing. I'm talking about people who don't, situations where you don't have any medical concern, and you're craving that food and you want to eat that food. So this leads into protective factors for what steps you can take and what's important to know about preventing eating disorders in children and loved ones. So these are huge. Don't label foods as good or bad. We do that so much. Good or bad, healthy, unhealthy, etc. Whatever labels you have and you've heard in your house or have heard other people use, because that labeling is exactly what causes those guilt feelings. Don't diet yourself. As parents, this is so important. Children really do what they see you do, not necessarily what you're telling them to do. So if you're telling your child not to diet, but you're dieting, that's going to impact them more. So I really encourage the whole family to change how they view food. Don't diet yourself. Don't encourage dieting in other people. Don't criticize your own body or other people's bodies, and certainly not your child's body. So I've had a lot of clients actually who tell me that the thing that triggered their eating disorder was hearing their parents talk about their own body. So mom or dad said about themselves, I don't like this body part of mine. I'm not going to wear this outfit because it highlights this body part, etc. And that's often what really triggers, for a lot of people I've seen, that is what has triggered the child to then get scared about their own body, because children see themselves in you. You're their parents. Also be mindful of how you compliment people's bodies. So kids are very sensitive. They're going to notice if you always are complimenting this person because their body looks like this. They're going to store that away in their mind, and they're going to know, okay, that's considered beautiful. If I don't look like that, then I'm not beautiful, and then I'm not worthy of praise. I'll also say focus on praising your child for their characteristics. So kind of just avoid commenting on bodies as a whole. That's the best practice to take. Focus on their personality traits, their accomplishments. That's much healthier for a child. If possible, keep your kitchen stocked with a wide variety of snacks and foods, again, within reason. If you have access to those foods, if economically, financially it's possible, that's actually one of the first things eating disorder specialists recommend, is keep your pantry stocked with all kinds of snacks. Even if you don't like it, make sure your child has access to it, because that is a very clear way to teach your child that you have permission to eat whatever you want. You don't have to feel guilty, and then let your child kind of regulate themselves and figure out how much they really do need to eat of which food group, because it's all of us have that ability to do that. We just have come up very far away from that. Avoid creating food rules. This could be anything from you can't eat at this time, or you have to wait this many hours between meals, or you're only allowed this many meals every day. That's a food rule. And it goes away from what sometimes our bodies are telling us to do. A really common food rule that I hear is, amongst Muslim clients, is you have to finish everything on your plate, or like you have to finish every crumb or every grain of rice on your plate. That's a very common one. And sometimes we associate that with like you're sinning if you don't eat everything on your plate. I would just say get into the habit of saving leftovers, because if you're kind of forcing your child to finish everything on their plate when they're visibly very full, what that can do is you're kind of giving them a subconscious message that you don't know how to feed yourself. Your body's giving you the wrong signals. I, the adult, know how to feed you. They're going to end up pretty confused about that. Not using food as punishment or reward. And take picky eating seriously. So this is the avoidant restrictive food intake disorder that I mentioned earlier, can sometimes present as picky eating. But take it seriously. If your kid is like not eating meat at all, for example, and that's your primary protein source as a family, take that seriously. Take them to get evaluated for any medical imbalance, or and just make sure that they're not having nutritional deficiencies because of that picky eating. Be very mindful of social media exposure. Now, that's something you can only control so much. I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't allow your child to have like a TikTok account or an Instagram account or anything like that. That's your decision as a parent. But what I will say is whether or not you allow it, your kid is going to be exposed to it, hands down, because they're going out, they're going to school, they have access to the internet. They're going to see images. They're going to see things. They're going to see things about diet culture. They're going to see harmful images depicting that only a certain body type is considered healthy. They're going to have that exposure no matter what. So whether or not you choose to allow that in your house, just at least have the conversation with them about that and about how those are not realistic bodies that you're seeing. These people often get surgery or procedures, or they use filters. Make sure you're talking about that with your child. Okay. Intuitive eating is basically the main approach that we use in eating disorder treatment. And this is something that we really encourage everybody to embody. This is a non-diet approach, giving yourself unconditional permission to eat what you want, when you want, and how much you want of it. So it's basically returning to your inner instincts when it comes to hunger, fullness, and cravings. They've done research on babies and toddlers, and they found that if they put a huge spread of foods and snacks in front of toddlers, they actually naturally end up filling their plate with everything that that dietitians recommend as a full, nutritious meal. So they have this natural ability to do that on their own. Babies, they know when they need to eat. They'll cry when they want to eat, and they'll usually stop when they're done. We all are born with this innate ability. So I think one important thing to consider is, at what point does that change? It's usually because of messages that we're getting from our families, from society, about how much we should or shouldn't be eating, when really your body is the only thing that knows how much you should be eating and what you should be eating. I have up here the hunger fullness scale. I think this is really helpful. I use this with my clients to help people who feel really disconnected from what their body is saying, or if they feel like they can't trust what their body is saying. The scale can kind of help with that. So it's on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being that you're so full that you could throw up, 1 being you're so famished that you're like passing out, basically. They experts usually recommend for us to stay at about a 6 or a 7 at all times. And if you dip below, especially if you get down to a 3 or 4, that's time to eat a meal. 4 or 5, time to eat a snack. 7, 8, 9, that's when it's time to stop eating. These are the principles of intuitive eating. So again, reject the diet mentality, honor your hunger and your fullness cues. If you're hungry, eat. If you're full, stop. It's as simple as that. A lot of people don't feel like they can do that because they haven't had the practice to do that, or they've had disordered eating, or they've heard messages that you should feel guilty if you do that. So a lot of people feel like they're losing control around certain foods. If you're able to remove that guilt factor, you will feel control around those foods. That's a common thing that happens. Make peace with food and challenge the food police. A lot of us have a really difficult relationship with food because we are feeling like food causes us distress because we can't trust our bodies, and because we've heard harmful things about foods that we want to eat. So it makes us feel like we are wrong, as opposed to maybe that message was wrong. Challenge the food police means we're going to have that internal voice. People around us are going to be telling us, like, maybe you shouldn't be eating that, or I'm not going to eat that because I think it's bad for me, even though I want it. Challenge that. If you want it, if you're craving it, maybe there is something in that food that your body internally knows it wants. When you get really good at intuitive eating, you're going to be able to pinpoint the exact snack and exactly how much you want of it at the exact time. It's a really cool place to get with your body. You don't need to follow any diet. You will already have, subhanAllah, the internal mechanism to know how to do that. Allow yourself to start feeling satisfied with food. It doesn't have to be this fight every time with your body whenever you want to enjoy a food. Respect your body. So that goes to how you're talking about yourself, your body image. That's an important part of this too. Work on really viewing your body with respect. Proactively cope with emotions. This is a big one with eating disorders. Sometimes people are using and not sometimes, most of the time, eating disorders are being used not just to change someone's body, but also to cope with negative emotions. People often use it to numb themselves so they don't have to feel the emotion. And that is obviously very harmful, because there are so much better ways to cope with your emotions without using food. Using food to cope with emotions can take you away from intuitive eating really, really fast. Joyful movement. We like to use that term instead of exercise because people really can tend to look at exercise as a way to change the way their body looks. And that's not very respectful of your body, because maybe your body that's not your set point weights, or that's not always healthy for people to change their body so dramatically. And so, return to the purpose of exercise. Maybe you really enjoy watching yourself getting stronger. Maybe you really enjoy the way a certain exercise feels on your body, instead of, I'm doing this so that I can change my body to look this way, and if that doesn't happen, then I get very upset with myself. That can really put you in a very negative spiral. Honor your health with gentle nutrition. So this one is just saying that once you get to intuitive eating and you're able to really understand your body, then be gentle about what you're feeding yourself and your idea of nutrition, instead of having those hard and fast facts of I must eat this amount of calories or I have to have these food groups in every single meal. Okay, here we go. So I just listed some common concerns that I always hear from people when I tell them to try intuitive eating. If I give myself full permission to eat, then I'm afraid I will. And there's a whole list of things that can come up for people. These are the ones that I've commonly heard. Then I will lose control around certain foods. So here's a reality. Here's what actually ends up happening. It's possible that the first time you try to let yourself eat whatever you want, maybe you do feel like you lose control and you end up getting to that 10 on the scale and you feel really uncomfortable and you feel like you're going to throw up. That might happen the first time or the first few times. But if you can continue to eat without feeling that guilt, it'll stop happening. That's happened every single time that I've seen it in my work. It's just that it's so natural for your body to eventually take over and tell you like, okay, I'm full now. I don't want to eat any more of this. And then you end up eating less than if you were to feel guilty about it, because again, you don't know when to stop when you're feeling guilty. I'm afraid I will overeat. Same thing. That's not going to happen. If you can really listen to your body's going to tell you exactly when you want to stop eating. The best way to listen to your body, again, is to not feel bad about what you're eating. I'm afraid I'll end up wasting food. Get into the habit of having leftovers, save or have a compost garden out in your home if you're able to, or know where the compost gardens are near your area. Food doesn't have to be wasted. Give it to a friend, like you don't have to hold that over your head. It's so much more important for you to be feeding your body in a healthy way. So another thing to consider, if you feel like you have to finish everything on your plate and you end up doing that and you're so uncomfortable, you're so full that you immediately have to go to the bathroom or throw up, then that kind of is wasting food, isn't it? So I just want people to consider that it's not doing you any favors if you didn't want to eat it in the first place. If I give myself full permission, that I'm afraid that I'll end up gaining weight. This is a big one. And the reality, what ends up happening, we don't know. Some people gain weight, some people lose weight, some people don't really change at all. But what does happen is weight regulation. You end up getting to your set point weight. If you're dieting, if you're not giving yourself permission to eat what you want, you might never know what your set point weight is. Your body will, again, keep increasing that set point weight or keep kind of fluctuating with it. And that can be really harmful. You will get to your set point weight if you eat intuitively and just let your body do what it was meant to do. If I give myself full permission, I'll become a less disciplined person. People are really scared of that. And what I have to say about that is, I think the best discipline is just honoring your body and what it's telling you to do. And again, feeling like you're not disciplined, I think sometimes that's because we're feeling guilty about what we're eating. So it all comes back to that guilt factor. And so that's really the emotion that as a family, everyone can be working on with certain foods. Other things that intuitive eating has been proven to result in: improved mental health, an improved relationship with food, improved quality of life. Most people usually actually end up increasing the amount of fruits and veggies that they're eating because they take away the idea of this food is good and that food is bad. And so then your body can really tell you what you actually want. And I've seen this in my clients too. People are like, I think I'm going to end up craving this food, but they actually end up craving something entirely different. For a lot of people, that happens to be fruits and veggies. I don't know why. That's what the research shows. It can actually help for people with type 2 diabetes. It can help with glycemic control. That's what the research shows. It helps people improve their body image, increase self-compassion and compassion in general. Okay, so what if my child already has an ED, has an eating disorder? So first thing, don't panic. Most of the medical consequences that I mentioned, even the really scary ones, are reversible. And so, yeah, don't panic about, oh no, their brain's going to stop maturing. No, their brain will eventually start maturing again. They just need to start eating. If they can get into treatment, the faster, the better. Those consequences will be reversible. So seek help immediately if you can, and stay involved in their treatment. A treatment team should include a therapist, a dietitian, and a doctor at the very least. A lot of people come to therapy and they think that they'll be able to recover with just a therapist or just a dietitian, or just a doctor. that may be true. It's not usually true, but I've seen it work sometimes. But your treatment's going to be much slower. And that's because a therapist doesn't have the in-depth knowledge of nutrition or like medical consequences. They only have the mental health knowledge around an eating disorder. Dietitian will only have the nutritional knowledge. A doctor will only have the medical knowledge. And so it's really important to have all those players involved. How you can stay involved in your child's treatment, eat together as a family, that can be very, very helpful. And again, work on your own disordered thoughts around food, make peace with food and with your body yourself. That's going to help them the most. Hide the weighing scales, hide the, if you have laxatives in your home, hide all of those things so they don't have access to it and they don't get triggered by it. Discourage intense exercise. If their eating disorder is severe, actually they shouldn't be exercising at all. But at the very least, you can discourage intense exercise. They don't need to be going to the gym every single day, and they don't need to be going for more than an hour, for example. The prior advice about what to do and what not to do, like don't make the labels on the foods, keeping your pantry stocked with all kinds of foods, all of that still applies here if they do have an active eating disorder. And I like to remind that eating disorders are like any mental illness, partly not really their choice. At some point, it's kind of their brain chemistry. So have empathy for your child. If you feel like if you feel like sometimes your child doesn't even sound like themselves, there's actually a strong reason for that. It's because their brain isn't getting the nutrients it needs to turn on those logical reasoning parts of the brain. And so they may not actually sometimes make sense. They may be saying things like, I need to lose more weight, or I need to change the way my body looks because it looks like this. And you're looking at them like, no, it doesn't, right? That part of their brain has stopped working sometimes, or it's slowed down at the very least. And so have empathy for them, understand that that also is reversible. When they start eating again, they're going to be able to step back into themselves and start thinking again. Considerations for if they are actively in recovery and starting to recover, their body might change quickly, especially if there was a lot of weight loss. They might start to gain weight in a short amount of time. And that's going to be kind of distressing and triggering for them. So just be really mindful and avoid making comments about it. Help them buy new clothes and don't make a big fuss about it. You can ask them like, why don't we go shopping, and then help them pick out clothes that they feel confident in and that fit their new body. A lot of times people will refuse to buy new clothes because they feel like, oh, maybe I'll be able to get back into this body. And that's not, again, that creates feelings of guilt, and that makes it really, really difficult to eat intuitively and to just work on your body image. It's really important to have good body image no matter what your body looks like. This is the body God gave you, and this is the body that's important to work on loving. Increased depression and anxiety. So this is interesting. A lot of times when people start to recover from their eating disorder, their depression and anxiety actually increases sometimes. And that's because oftentimes the eating disorder was like the coping tool. And when that's not there anymore, then they have that anxiety and that depression there, and they don't have that to lean on. So there may be a spike in that right as they're recovering, and then it'll go down again. One thing that parents sometimes do is they'll notice their kid gaining weight, or they're eating normally again, and they'll pull them out of treatment. It's really important to keep them in treatment actually because of the depression and the anxiety spike. And so I would wait for that to happen, talk to the treatment providers, and make sure that it's a mutual decision to stop the treatment. Okay, refrain from letting the eating disorder define the client completely. This is a huge one. Sometimes clients feel like, I've heard a lot of children say things like, I feel like I'm a burden on my parent because they're constantly worried about my eating. They have to pay for all my treatment, and everyone's always worried about it all the time. And so that can really have a negative effect on the child's self-esteem. So just remind them things like, like, I want you to get better. Like, don't worry about finances. That's my job to worry about that as the adult here. And help them find hobbies and activities outside of diet and exercise. For a long time, that may have been the only way that they defined themselves as a person, because they were so fully caught up in all the diet and exercise that it was the only thing they could talk about or think about. So help them find other activities. Maybe you can do activities as a family. Spend enjoyable time with them. Refrain from overcriticism, not just with their bodies and food, but in all aspects. A lot of people with eating disorders, especially anorexia, suffer from intense cases of perfectionism, and that's because they're used to so much of that self-criticism and criticism from other people. And so you as their caregiver don't have to be a source of that criticism. You can teach them how to talk to themselves in a nicer way. Okay. A note on just when is the eating disorder getting severe and you need immediate like emergency medical intervention. If there's a lot of rapid weight loss and like that your child is getting dizzy or they're fainting, those are really really intense signs that something's not right. They could have like sudden hair loss or changes in their skin, also a sign. Disruption in menstrual cycle. If you know that they're going to the bathroom for hours every day using laxatives, vomiting after they're eating, or every time they eat, they go and they do some intense exercise, also a sign that it's more severe than you think. If their face is swelling, that's often a sign that they're vomiting. They're making themselves vomit a lot. So be mindful of that too. Like face swelling is something that goes missed. But if you notice that happening in addition to everything, that's kind of a red flag. Difficulty tolerating cold temperatures, weakness or constant exhaustion, lethargy, digestive issues. So if they're feeling constipated all the time, if they're not even going to the bathroom, that's another red flag. Electrolyte imbalance. Make sure you're getting your child checked, have their electrolytes checked and their vitals checked regularly so that you know what's going on. Also, this one is interesting. Other health conditions may randomly pop up. I put that in quotations because sometimes I do hear people say things like, oh, I don't know why, but like suddenly I realized that I'm anemic or something. And it's not that sudden, right? You haven't been eating, so it makes sense that you would have these other issues pop up. Or people might say like, suddenly I have this issue focusing, or I have like an irregular heartbeat. That's usually not unrelated to the eating disorder. It should be seen as a sign of the eating disorder, just because all systems of the body can be impacted so intensely. Okay, so heal your own relationship with food. This one is so important. Again, your child is going to do what they see you doing, not what they hear you saying. So it's so important for you as a family to work on these things. If your child's having body image concerns, ask yourself, do you have body image concern? Do you have a poor body image? Here's some questions you can just reflect on, maybe journal about if you have some time. What are your own food rules, expectations for yourself? How in tune are you with your own hunger and fullness cues? Are you able to eat right when you notice hunger? Are you even able to notice your hunger? Are you able to notice when you feel full? And then are you able to stop eating when you feel full? How do you cope with your stress and your emotions? Is food involved in that? What diet culture myths have you internalized? The ones that we went over earlier in this presentation. Which ones of those did you read and did you feel like, oh wait, I do actually believe, some part of me does believe that, or some part of me doesn't want to believe that this is false, or that some part of me can't believe that this research really says this. What has been your own history with your body image? I actually like to have clients create a timeline of from as long their first memory to now, what was all the ways they felt about their body, all the times they felt bad about their body, all the times they felt good about their body, and just kind of see when has it fluctuated and what caused that. So I encourage you to do that for yourself. Would you want your child talking to themselves the way you talk to yourself? Focus on your body's functionality. So instead of focusing on how it looks, or how it feels, how it looks in the mirror, how it fits in clothes, focus on what does it do for you? How does it look to you can often bring about a very different answer than what does it do for you, right? It can make us feel different things. I have an image here of Be Body Positive. This is a really cool website, organization that really does trainings and has resources on ways to improve your body image. So if you're interested for you or for your child or a loved one, you can check this out. Okay, and now I've got some homework for everybody that I like to do this one with clients. It's kind of fun. So we tend to do this one with, you can do this with any snack that's like bite size, so like M&Ms or something like that, something that you really want to eat and you crave sometimes. So have a bowl of that in front of you. And this is a mindful eating practice. This is how we really should be eating whenever we're eating anything. So you're going to do this, you're going to do rounds of this. So for your first round, you're just going to have one M&M and just eat it normally. Don't really think about it too much. Eat it how you would eat it. And then you're going to notice, how do you feel after eating that M&M? Did you want more? Did you want less? Were you able to even tell how you feel? Are you confused about how you feel? So you'll do that first. Now for the next round, you're going to practice mindful eating. Mindful eating is eating with all of your senses, taste, obviously, but also vision. What does that food look like? Like, hold it in your hand, feel the texture of it, smell it, maybe rustle the bowl around a bit and see what it sounds like. Really immerse yourself in the food. And then when you do taste it and start eating it, eat very slowly and allow yourself guilt-free to fully enjoy that one M&M or whatever you're eating. Again, I'm just using M&Ms as an example. And then ask yourself, do you want more? Do you want less? How do you feel? How satisfied do you feel compared to the first round? So usually, I'll give a spoiler, usually people feel much more satisfied in the second round than they do in the first round. The first round often causes some confusion, not sure if they even enjoyed the food or not. In the first or in the second round, does cause some more clarity. So I would encourage everyone to try this exercise maybe after iftar today. If you're fasting, try eating your iftar mindfully versus not mindfully, and see what differences result for you. Okay, I've got some resources here that I think are really, really helpful. So, oh, did I skip a slide? I think I did. Let me see. Oh, okay, yes, these are just my citations of the research that I included in here in case anyone wants to look at it. Okay, and then these are the resources that I really like. A couple books that talk about the things I talked about in depth and good for getting your feet wet with these concepts. I really like the book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. It just really busts that stigma around gaining weight and why everything we've been taught isn't really fair or correct all the time. And it's not good for society, frankly. The Intuitive Eating book goes into depth about how you can start to become an intuitive eater. Then there's some podcasts I really like. They're Food Psych and Dietitians Unplugged is run by dietitians who follow intuitive eating, and they give a lot of information about different concerns that people have. There's also the Science Versus podcast that busts a lot of those myths that I shared earlier. I've also included some some Texas eating disorder treatment centers. Central Texas Eating Disorder Association is a big one. Eating Recovery Center is a big one. Meadows, they're opening a center in Austin soon, so that'll be another resource. They do free assessments usually, so you can just call them and say, hey, I'm worried about my child. Can you assess them and see if they might have an eating disorder? And they'll do it for free, and then they'll give you resources, or they'll give you resources and referrals for what to do next. So I also included the link for our website, Austin Counseling and Nutrition. We are a outpatient private practice, so we don't work with severe cases normally that you need to be in a treatment center for that. But we do work with people who are kind of out of the crisis zone of eating disorders and are wanting to maintain, or they don't have a serious situation. We have a link on our website where you can ask our dietitians any question about food and they will respond. So I'd encourage y'all to check that out. If after this presentation you had some curious thoughts about like, oh, is that really how my body will respond? Or if there's anything about what you're eating or what your diets have looked like, you can ask them these questions for free. You just go on our website to the contact page, submit your question, and they will get back to you. Okay. I think this is my last slide. So we can do Q&A. I think we have time for that.
We do have a question here.
Okay. Oh, I see it. Yeah, so we should meet with therapist, dietitian, and a doctor to maximize the effectiveness. Okay, this is a really good question. Okay, so the question is that you mentioned that we should meet with therapists, dietitians, and doctors to maximize the effectiveness of treatment. But it seems like many doctors prioritize weight loss methods, and they link obesity to many diseases and harshly treat patients who do have a bigger body. How should we deal with that if we visit a doctor? That's a really, really good question. And it's a really difficult question because you're absolutely right. A lot of doctors and dietitians, actually, and therapists, just because of the nature of the world we live in, are trained to have that weight stigma. It's just, it's a sad fact, but that is what it is. And it's not even their fault. It's literally the training. It's intertwined in the training that they're getting in their education. I would really recommend that you seek out eating disorder specific providers. So there's a term we like to call health at every size. Actually, I think I included all the resources. I did. Yeah. So health at every size is all about helping people find their optimal health at their size and not making weight loss a goal. And so you can search up, you can Google health at every size doctors near me. There are a few in Austin, unfortunately, not a whole lot. I think the community is getting bigger and bigger, but right now there's not a lot. So that's something you can do. What you also can do if you know that like maybe you really like your doctor, you have a good relationship with them or your dietitian, I would encourage you to actually talk to them and tell them like, hey, these are my beliefs. Like, don't talk to me about weight. And usually you can ask your therapist too, I've done this for people. I'll reach out to the doctor ahead of time and tell them, hey, our shared patient has an eating disorder. So can you make sure if you need to get their weight, do a blind weight, don't share their weight with them. Don't talk to them about weights. Can you just focus on what they really need to know? And then a note on just like as society, a really important social justice effort we need to be making is challenging why treatment and doctors' offices and dietitians are promoting weight loss, because all the research is showing that we cannot effectively make people lose weight and keep it off, right? So we need to be working on that as a society and educating ourselves. Okay, another question: how to address picky eating habits of my kids? Okay, yeah, so it's important to, again, I'm assuming that you mean like picky eating as opposed to they don't like certain foods versus they're not completely cutting out an entire food group. If they're completely cutting out an entire food group, that's an eating disorder. I would encourage you getting them to see a dietitian at the very least. And definitely get their vitals checked by a doctor to see if they're having any nutritional deficiencies. Picky eating, we actually usually say that there's not much you need to do about that. Like if they're just like, I don't like this specific meal that you make, that's okay. Give them other options to eat. That's how you can help people be intuitive eaters. We don't believe picky eating is a harmful thing. It is if that's the only food that you have and you don't have access to anything else. But if you are able to give them other foods, that actually might be the best route. Oh, I just thought, okay, there's a second part to this question. I'm sorry. Okay, so how to address picky eating habits of my kids? They always tend to incline towards sugary foods and fried foods. Yeah, this is such a good question. Okay, so this is exactly what we like to work on with intuitive eating. So again, this is what people always feel like it doesn't make sense to them. Give them permission to eat those sugary foods and those fried foods. Let them do it. It's very likely that they are wanting the sugary and fried foods because they feel like they're not allowed to have it, right? Everyone's brains work like this. If we feel like we can't do something, that's exactly where we're going to go. It's the story that repeats itself for all humans everywhere. If you tell your child, yeah, okay, you can have the sugary foods, that's okay, that's fine. Let them have the fried foods. They'll maybe lose control eating a lot of it once or twice, maybe 3 times, and then it'll stop and they'll be able to know, okay, maybe I don't actually want this sugary snack right now. Maybe I don't want this fried right now. Maybe I actually want something else. They're not going to be able to do that if they don't first give themselves permission to eat those foods. So as hard as that can be as a parent, you need to make sure you're letting them eat what they're wanting, as long as they're not having nutritional deficiencies, and you need to do it yourself too. So that's the hard part, but that is the best way to prevent harmful eating in your children. Okay. Why would you discourage labeling food in America? Because the food industry doesn't police the quality of food correctly. Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question. This person, okay, so you asked, why would you discourage labeling food in America because the food industry doesn't police the quality of food correctly? Would you mind just putting an example or maybe more of an explanation so I can understand the question in the Q&A, and then I'll loop back to that one. Okay, the other question, you mentioned how muscle mass that could result in how low muscle mass could result in osteoporosis. What are some ways to measure muscle mass? Specifically, pediatrician would be able to evaluate someone with this condition. So it's really just it's less about muscle mass and more just bone health, because your bones need nutrients too. And I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak to that. But if you do, just take them to a pediatrician and tell them this is a concern. Specifically, if pediatricians have if they have experience with eating disorders, that's kind of the best thing you can do. Or just a primary care doctor, they'll be able to refer you to the correct specialty and get the proper tests done. But yeah, just if you have a question, ask your doctor, ask your provider, and they'll be able to help you get those measures done. Okay, nice comment. Okay, here we go. How to help adult children if they don't want to go to the doctor and check out vital signs to see if there is a problem or not. Yeah, adult children is always really, really difficult. I know. That's always hard because with a child, a minor, you can just kind of drag them to the doctor's office. You can't really do that with an adult child. So my heart goes out to you with that, I'm sure the effort that it's taking to do that. I think just talk to them about how you're really concerned about their health, and then do your best as a family, if you all live together, to work on those intuitive eating practices as a family. You can share research with them. Sometimes also you can tell people, like, you can pick one of the providers that might be an in. So like if they're refusing to go to a doctor, but maybe they'd consider a therapist, or maybe they'd consider a dietitian, you can tell them like, okay, just go try it once, go see a dietitian once, and then we'll go from there. That's sometimes what I do with clients who they're working with me, a therapist, but they don't want to see a dietitian. So I'll often say, like, just go try it once and just see what happens. It's often not what you think it's going to be. But yeah, that is a difficult one. I think there's no clear answer to that because adults have autonomy. They get to do what they want. And I think if you can be consistent and share what you're concerned about them, what you are feeling, surround them by social media that's positive and not negative, bodies that actually look real and that reflect what the human race really looks like, as opposed to the figures that we tend to see. If you can kind of make that a norm in your home, that might give them some subconscious signaling to work on themselves. Okay, someone says, okay, this is a clarification of the first question. The accessibility of so much sugary foods is high. You can find a hard time finding healthy snacks in a grocery store. You need to label that something is not good for your children to make the right choices in the future. Yeah, so I would really encourage you to actually look on the research on this, because there's a lot of conflicting research. And again, the best way to get your child to not overeat a food is by letting them eat the food. I cannot stress that enough. Everyone feels like it's not going to work for them, and then everyone finds out it does work really well for them, and it works better than any other restriction method. So I'm just going to continue to stress that if you really are concerned about how much of a certain food your kid is eating, you have to take a deep breath and let them have that food, and eventually they'll figure out, okay, I actually don't, having that much sugary food is kind of making my stomach hurt, and I don't think I actually want it that much. But they're doing it so much right now because they feel like they're not allowed to. That's just what it almost always comes down to. Yeah, so encourage them to, and you can have this conversation with them. I know I said before that you shouldn't be eating this, but like, I want to make sure that you don't feel guilty about it if your body wants it. Why don't we let you have it? And then see what happens. And I really, really am going to continue to encourage that, because that's how you will find change to happen. We've not found any restriction method to be effective ever. So yeah, I hope that answered that question. Age group, yes, this applies to all age groups, truly. But yeah, I think that's asking which age group we're referring to. You can really apply this to all age groups. You may have to do a little bit more hand holding the younger they are, but still nonetheless encourage them to eat what they want to eat. Okay. Are there any other questions?
So inshallah, we will be uploading this session on YouTube as well. And our YouTube channel is youtube.com/NAMCC ATX NAMCC ATX Masjid. This is our handle on any of the social media, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, NAMCC ATX Masjid. That's a single place to look for. And then you can look at the playlist, Mental Health Awareness Series. That's over like 50 hours of content on different topics. And we keep adding these different sessions that we're recording. And Sister Najeeha is here. She's part of our Austin community. If you want to do a follow-up and you want to have like a discussion, then her contact information is there. You can take it to the next, on your personal level. These sessions are more about the awareness, and we want to open the doors for our community members to know, what resources are available, who are the specialists in our community, whom we can go and approach them. Um,
I just
Go
wanted
ahead,
to
sister.
ask, yeah, it looks like we have one more question. Do we have time for it?
Yeah, please go for it.
Okay, so someone just said, what can you say to your child if you notice they may be showing signs of disordered eating? Yeah, I would really encourage you to talk to them about it. And it helps like if you have like a appointment scheduled with like their primary care doctor or pediatrician, and then you can get their vitals checked out. If they're a little bit older, like with older kids, there can be a little bit of resistance. But yeah, I would just really have a really point blank discussion with them about it. Avoid talking about their body too much. Like, I notice your body looks like this and your weight has changed like this. That can feel pretty triggering to them. But you can just say like, I'm noticing that I'm noticing some changes, and I just want to make sure that you're healthy and you're safe. And you can even share like I've also gone through some issues figuring out my body image, and I want to make sure that we can get you some help and support. There's probably going to be resistance. A lot of families have to repeatedly have these talks with their kids until they finally agree to go. And at some point, it may feel like you're forcing them to go to treatment. With this disorder, that can be necessary because it's so deadly. And so don't be scared to like drag them to the doctor's office if you need to, is what I'll say.
There's one more thing, sister, is like you take your kid to a doctor and they say everything is good and they look healthy. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking like, oh, they're not eating right and they're not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that kind of a situation?
Yeah, so get a second opinion from a therapist or a dietitian who specializes in eating disorders. Because a lot of doctors, they learn so much in school, and eating disorders is not always one of those things. And weight science is not always one of those things. And nutrition isn't even sometimes often one of those things. And so doctors are doing their best. They may not catch everything, and this may not even be in their scope of practice because their focus is something else. So take them to another professional that will be able to help them with your specific concerns.
So what are these indicators? You mentioned a lot of points, like, the weight, they say like, the weight is for their age and gender. It is in the safe category, um, and they're growing tall.
Yeah.
So how do we associate that eating disorder with the growth development?
Are you asking like others how eating disorders can impact growth?
Or how do we, like, we understand, we look at our kids on daily basis and we see that they're not eating right, they're not eating this, they're not eating that. But Alhamdulillah, the things are going fine. We go to the doctor and everything is working fine. The
Mm.
charts are looking good. So how do we correlate both of these,
Oh,
what we
yeah.
see and what's on the paper?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, sometimes eating disorders don't show up in people's bodies. It's very interesting because there's so many factors that go into it, right? And so for some people, their bodies are going to dramatically change. For some people, by looking at them, you'll never know. So if it's severe, you can ask if the doctor can do more intense assessments, like for example, an EKG, and look at what's happening in their heart if it's intense. Um, and also like there's some things that we may just not know, but you can have a sense of like maybe their body's growing just fine, but we may not fully know exactly what's happening to like their fertility or their bones. We may not know what's happening to their brain. And so get their vitals checked. Those are kind of the bare minimum things, electrolytes, all that. But then also just look at how they're eating. Like maybe they're not having any medical conditions, but maybe they are consistently skipping meals, which is a proven way to result. Skipping meals is a way to like cause yourself to binge eat. And so if you know they're skipping meals, you know that that's unhealthy, whether their body's showing it or not, you know that's not healthy for them. You know it's going to impact their concentration at school and things like that. And so a lot of times people with eating disorders are very high functioning and they don't show signs of distress, but you're their parents and you may get a sense of something. And so if you feel something's wrong, something's not right, just take them to a dietitian or a therapist. They may be able to give more insight into what's happening outside of the medical world.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for the great questions. And yeah, welcome to reach out to me with more questions. And inshallah, I'll be able to respond through email, or I think my phone number might be there too, and you're welcome to reach out.
Jazakallah khair, sister Najeeha. Inshallah, we'll hope to have you back again soon with
Inshallah.
more interesting, another interesting topic, inshallah. And every month, for the remaining folks on the call, we do these sessions every third Saturday of the month, same time, 11:30 to 1. Look out for those emails that go out 2 weeks in advance. And all the videos get uploaded to the YouTube channel as well. Jazakallah khair for your time. And inshallah, we'll meet again. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.